before we dive deep into this forbidden knowledge that has been suppressed for centuries, I want to know, what time is it where you're watching this right now? And where in the world are you tuning in from? I'm asking because time and location are about to become incredibly significant to understanding why you wake up exhausted, and I want you to start paying attention to these details because they're connected to something much deeper than you realize. You see, your experience of tiredness isn't random, it's tied to cosmic cycles, dimensional shifts, and energy patterns that most people have no idea are affecting them every single night. So drop your location and time in the comments, because by the end of this video, you'll understand exactly why these details matter to your soul's nocturnal journey. You go to bed at night expecting rest, expecting restoration, expecting to wake up refreshed and ready to face the world, but instead, you drag yourself out of bed feeling like you've been hit by a truck, more exhausted than when you laid your head on that pillow 8 hours ago. You've probably been told this is normal, that it's just stress, that you need better sleep hygiene, maybe a new mattress or some melatonin supplements. But what if I told you that everything you've been taught about sleep and tiredness is a carefully constructed lie designed to keep you from discovering the most profound truth about human consciousness? What if the reason you wake up drained isn't because your body didn't rest, but because your soul has been working overtime in dimensions you can't even imagine, engaged in spiritual labor that your conscious mind has been programmed to forget the moment you open your eyes? This isn't some new age fantasy or wishful thinking. This is ancient knowledge that mystery schools have guarded for millennia, teachings that were banned by religious institutions because they revealed humanity's true multidimensional nature and threaten the control systems that keep us spiritually asleep even when we think we're awake. The exhaustion you feel every morning is actually proof that you're far more powerful and spiritually active than you've ever been allowed to believe. And today I'm going to expose exactly what's happening to your consciousness while your physical body lies motionless in bed, why certain forces have worked tirelessly to keep this information hidden from the masses, and most importantly, how you can begin to work with your soul's nocturnal activities instead of against them, transforming your sleep from a draining experience into the most powerful spiritual practice of your entire existence. The ancient Egyptians knew something about sleep that modern science desperately wants to keep buried, something so revolutionary that it would completely shatter our understanding of reality if it became mainstream knowledge. In the secret chambers beneath the Sphinx, in hieroglyphs that tourists will never see, in papyrus scrolls locked away in private collections, the Egyptian mystery schools documented what they called the nightly death, not because sleep was dangerous, but because every single night, your consciousness literally dies to this physical reality and is reborn into what they called the Duat, the other world where souls travel, learn, and work on behalf of the collective human experience. But here's where it gets absolutely mind-blowing. The Egyptians discovered that most people's souls don't just passively float around in some dreamy unconscious state during sleep, they're actually assigned specific tasks, spiritual missions, karmic healing work, and dimensional maintenance duties that require enormous amounts of energy, which is exactly why you wake up feeling like you've been running a marathon in your sleep, because energetically, you have been. The Egyptian priests understood that consciousness doesn't simply turn off when you close your eyes, it shifts into what they called the Ka body, your astral double that exists simultaneously in multiple dimensions, and this Ka body has responsibilities, contracts, and work to do that your waking mind has been systematically trained to forget through centuries of religious conditioning and social programming. The early Christian church banned these teachings because they revealed that humans are naturally multidimensional beings with access to divine knowledge and healing abilities, which threaten the church's monopoly on spiritual authority and their narrative that humans are powerless sinners dependent on external salvation. The exhaustion you feel is actually your physical body trying to integrate the massive downloads of information, the healing energy work, and the interdimensional travel that your soul has been engaged in all night long. But because you've never been taught how to consciously participate in these processes, your energy systems become overwhelmed and depleted instead of enhanced and restored. What's even more shocking is that the Tibetan Buddhist monasteries have preserved teachings about sleep that are so advanced, so precise in their understanding of consciousness, that Western science is only now beginning to glimpse the edges of what these monks have known for over 1,000 years. In the secret oral transmissions passed down through lineages of realized masters, they speak of something called dream yoga, but this isn't the watered-down version you might find in popular meditation books. This is a sophisticated technology for conscious participation in what happens when your awareness leaves your physical body every single night. The Tibetan masters discovered that during sleep, your consciousness doesn't just randomly wander through dream landscapes, it follows specific routes through what they call the Bardo realms, intermediate states of existence where souls go to process karma, receive teachings from enlightened beings, and participate in the healing of ancestral patterns that span generations. But here's the crucial part that explains your morning exhaustion. Most people's consciousness gets trapped in these Bardo realms because they've never learned how to navigate them skillfully, so instead of moving through these dimensions efficiently and returning refreshed, their awareness gets stuck in lower vibrational planes where they're essentially doing cleanup work for collective human trauma, processing not just their own unresolved emotions and karmic debts, but taking on the energetic burdens of their family lineage, their community, and sometimes even global consciousness patterns that need healing. The Tibetan teachings reveal that sensitive individuals, empaths, and those going through spiritual awakening often become what they call nocturnal bodhisattvas, souls who unconsciously volunteer for intensive healing work during sleep, which is incredibly noble and necessary for planetary evolution, but absolutely draining if you don't know how to protect your energy and set proper boundaries in these non-physical realms. The monks developed specific meditation practices, mantras, and visualization techniques to help practitioners maintain conscious awareness during sleep, allowing them to participate in this interdimensional work without depleting their life force energy. But these practices were considered so advanced and potentially dangerous if misused that they were only taught to students who had already mastered years of foundational spiritual disciplines. The Hermetic tradition, those mysterious alchemists and mystics who influenced everything from Renaissance art to modern psychology, possessed perhaps the most sophisticated understanding of what they called the great work of sleep, and their knowledge was so threatening to established power structures that practitioners were literally burned at the stake for possessing this information. The Hermetic masters understood that sleep isn't a passive state of unconsciousness, it's actually the most active spiritual practice available to human beings, a time when consciousness is freed from the limitations of physical matter and can access what they called the astral light, an infinite field of information and energy that connects all living beings across time and space. But here's what makes this knowledge so revolutionary and explains why you feel exhausted. The Hermetic teachings reveal that every human being is naturally connected to what they called the collective unconscious long before Carl Jung borrowed this term, and during sleep, your individual consciousness merges with this vast network of human experience, where you literally help process and transmute the emotional, mental, and spiritual challenges that humanity as a whole is facing. Think about this, every night while you think you're just sleeping, your soul is actually plugging into a cosmic internet of consciousness where you're downloading information about global events, feeling the pain and joy of people you'll never meet, and contributing your own unique energy signature to the healing and evolution of human awareness itself. The Hermetic alchemists called this the solve et coagula of sleep, the nightly dissolution of individual ego boundaries and the reformation of consciousness that's been enriched by contact with universal wisdom. But this process requires enormous amounts of energy, especially if your auric field isn't properly protected and your energy centers aren't cleared and balanced before you enter these expanded states of awareness. The reason mystery schools were so secretive about these teachings wasn't because they wanted to hoard knowledge, but because they understood that without proper preparation, training, and energetic protection, attempting to consciously participate in these cosmic processes could literally burn out a person's nervous system or leave them permanently ungrounded in physical reality. Ancient Vedic traditions from India, preserved in Sanskrit texts that predate recorded history, contain some of the most detailed descriptions of what happens to consciousness during sleep, and these teachings were systematically suppressed by colonial powers because they revealed that ordinary human beings have access to the same cosmic awareness that was supposedly reserved for gods and divine beings. The Vedic sages understood that what we call sleep is actually yoga nidra, not the relaxation technique that's been popularized in modern wellness culture, but a natural state of consciousness where individual awareness merges with what they called Brahman, the underlying unity that connects all existence, and during this merger, your soul receives direct downloads of cosmic intelligence while simultaneously contributing your own life experiences to the infinite library of universal knowledge. But here's the part that explains your exhaustion. The Vedic texts reveal that most people's consciousness during sleep becomes what they call ahankara-dominated, meaning their ego structures and unresolved emotional patterns create energetic blockages that prevent smooth flow between individual awareness and cosmic consciousness. So instead of experiencing the natural restoration that comes from this divine connection, their energy becomes fragmented and depleted as it struggles to maintain separation while simultaneously trying to merge with unity. The ancient rishis discovered that people who wake up tired are usually those whose souls are carrying what they called samskaras, deeply embedded patterns of karma, trauma, and unconscious beliefs that create resistance to the natural flow of cosmic energy during sleep, forcing their consciousness to work much harder to process and integrate the spiritual information and healing energies that are naturally available during these expanded states. The Vedic masters developed incredibly sophisticated practices including specific breathing techniques, sound vibrations, and energy purification rituals that could clear these blockages and allow consciousness to flow effortlessly between individual and cosmic awareness during sleep. But these practices required understanding of subtle energy anatomy, chakra systems, and karma that was considered too advanced for anyone who hadn't already achieved significant levels of spiritual development and self-mastery. What's absolutely shocking is that indigenous shamanic traditions from cultures that had no contact with each other, from the Amazon rainforest to the Siberian tundra, from Aboriginal Australia to the mountains of Peru, all independently developed remarkably similar understandings of sleep as a time when the soul travels to what they universally called the dream time, the other side, or the world behind the world, and every single one of these traditions recognized that exhaustion upon waking was a sign that the soul had been engaged in what they called heavy work in these non-physical realms. The shamans understood that during sleep, consciousness doesn't just rest. It becomes a bridge between the world of form and the world of spirit, allowing healing energies, prophetic visions, and ancient wisdom to flow from the invisible realms into physical reality. But this process of serving as a conduit between dimensions requires the soul to literally stretch across multiple levels of existence simultaneously, which is incredibly taxing if the person hasn't been trained in proper energy management and spiritual protection techniques. Indigenous medicine people developed elaborate rituals and ceremonies specifically designed to prepare tribal members for what they called sacred sleep, using plant medicines, energy clearing practices, and protective prayers to ensure that when someone's consciousness traveled to the spirit world during sleep, they would be protected from negative entities, energetic parasites, and the overwhelming intensity of direct contact with cosmic forces that could easily burn out an unprepared nervous system. The shamanic traditions also understood that certain individuals were naturally called to serve as what they called dream workers or night travelers, souls who volunteered to take on extra responsibilities during sleep, including healing work for community members, communication with ancestor spirits, and gathering information from the spirit world that could benefit the tribe. But these individuals required special training, ongoing energetic support, and community recognition of their sacrifice because this type of spiritual service was known to be physically and emotionally depleting without proper preparation and aftercare. The Gnostic Christians, Those early followers of Jesus who possessed the secret oral teachings that were systematically destroyed by the Roman Catholic Church, understood sleep in a way that would revolutionize Christianity if these teachings were ever made public, because they reveal that what Jesus called the kingdom of heaven isn't some distant afterlife destination. It's actually a state of consciousness that every human being naturally accesses during sleep, and the reason you wake up exhausted is because your soul has been literally working in this heavenly dimension all night long, participating in what the Gnostics called the great work of restoration, the ongoing healing and evolution of human consciousness itself. The Gnostic Gospels that were buried in the Egyptian desert and hidden for centuries contain explicit descriptions of what happens when consciousness leaves the physical body during sleep. It doesn't just float around in some unconscious void. It actively participates in cosmic councils, receives direct instruction from enlightened beings, and engages in healing work that spans across time and space. But most people's souls return to their bodies carrying enormous amounts of information and energy that their untrained minds can't properly integrate, leading to the exhaustion, confusion, and spiritual emptiness that characterizes most people's daily experience. The Gnostic masters taught that Jesus himself was primarily a teacher of these sleep consciousness techniques, showing his disciples how to maintain awareness during the transition between waking and sleeping states, how to protect their energy while traveling in non-physical dimensions, and how to bring back healing abilities and divine knowledge that could transform not just their own lives but contribute to the spiritual evolution of humanity as a whole. The Catholic Church banned and destroyed these teachings because they revealed that every human being has direct access to divine consciousness and healing abilities, which completely undermine the Church's claims of exclusive spiritual authority and their narrative that salvation could only come through external religious institutions rather than through direct personal experience of cosmic consciousness. Modern quantum physics is finally beginning to catch up with what mystery schools have known for millennia about the nature of consciousness during sleep, and the implications are so staggering that mainstream science is desperately trying to suppress or discredit research that proves consciousness exists independently of the physical brain and continues to be active and aware even when the body appears to be unconscious. Cutting-edge research in quantum field theory suggests that consciousness isn't produced by the brain but is actually a fundamental property of the universe itself, similar to gravity or electromagnetism, which means that during sleep, when brain activity appears to decrease, consciousness isn't becoming less active. It's becoming more active as it's freed from the limiting filters of physical sensory perception and can access quantum fields of information that exist beyond the boundaries of space and time. Scientists studying near-death experiences, out-of-body phenomena, and lucid dreaming are discovering that consciousness during these states demonstrates abilities that are literally impossible if awareness was purely a product of brain chemistry. People report accurate perceptions of events happening in distant locations, communication with deceased individuals who provide verifiable information unknown to the dreamer, and access to knowledge about future events that later prove to be remarkably accurate. But the most significant discovery is that prolonged contact with these expanded states of consciousness requires enormous amounts of energy and can leave people feeling depleted if they haven't learned how to navigate these experiences skillfully. Researchers studying what they call consciousness field theory are finding evidence that individual human consciousness is naturally connected to a vast network of awareness that some scientists are calling the zero-point field or the quantum vacuum. And during sleep, when the barriers between individual and collective consciousness become permeable, sensitive individuals often find themselves unconsciously processing information and emotional energy from this collective field, which explains why empathic and spiritually sensitive people often report feeling exhausted after sleep and experiencing emotions, thoughts, and physical sensations that don't seem to belong to them personally. The Sufi mystics, those ecstatic seekers of divine union who spun themselves into transcendent states and wrote poetry that bridged the gap between human love and cosmic devotion, possessed secret teachings about sleep that were so profound and potentially dangerous that they were only transmitted orally from master to student in private initiations, never written down where they could be discovered by those who weren't properly prepared to handle this knowledge. The Sufi masters understood that sleep is actually the most natural and accessible form of what they called fana, the dissolution of individual ego consciousness into direct experience of divine unity. But they also recognized that this nightly ego death and spiritual rebirth could be overwhelming for souls who hadn't developed sufficient spiritual strength and clarity to handle the intensity of direct contact with what they called the beloved, their term for the cosmic consciousness that underlies all existence. The Sufi teachings reveal that during sleep, individual consciousness merges with the divine in a way that allows for direct transmission of spiritual knowledge, healing energy, and mystical experiences. But this merger also means that the soul temporarily takes on aspects of cosmic responsibility, participating in what they called the divine maintenance, the ongoing work of sustaining and evolving the fabric of reality itself, which requires enormous amounts of spiritual energy and can leave the individual feeling drained if they haven't learned how to surrender completely to this process rather than trying to maintain ego control during these profound spiritual experiences. The Sufi masters developed elaborate practices including whirling meditation, breath work, and sacred chanting that were designed to prepare consciousness for the nightly journey into divine union, teaching students how to dissolve ego boundaries gradually during waking states so that the transition into cosmic consciousness during sleep would be smooth and restorative rather than jarring and depleting. But they warn that attempting these advanced practices without proper guidance and purification could result in what they called spiritual intoxication, a condition where the soul becomes addicted to transcendent experiences but loses the ability to function effectively in ordinary reality. The Kabbalistic tradition within Judaism contains some of the most detailed maps of consciousness during sleep that exist in any spiritual system, describing in precise detail the multiple levels of soul awareness and their specific functions during what they called the little death of nightly sleep. But these teachings were considered so sacred and potentially dangerous that they were restricted to married men over 40 who had already mastered traditional religious studies and demonstrated exceptional moral character and spiritual stability. The Kabbalistic masters understood that human beings don't have just one soul but multiple layers of soul consciousness that they called nefesh, ruach, and neshama, and during sleep, these different aspects of soul awareness travel to different dimensions of reality where they engage in specific types of spiritual work. The nefesh remains connected to the physical body and processes emotional and instinctual patterns. The ruach travels to what they called the world of formation where it receives intellectual and creative inspiration, and the neshama ascends to the world of creation where it participates in cosmic consciousness and divine will. But the process of coordinating these multiple levels of soul activity and integrating their experiences upon waking requires enormous amounts of energy and sophisticated understanding of spiritual anatomy that most people completely lack. The Kabbalistic texts describe in detail how unbalanced or unprepared souls can become fragmented during sleep, with different aspects of consciousness getting stuck in inappropriate dimensions or taking on spiritual burdens that they're not equipped to handle, leading to the exhaustion, confusion, and spiritual emptiness that characterizes most people's waking experience. But they also provide specific prayers, meditations, and energy practices that can help maintain harmony between the different levels of soul consciousness and ensure that the nightly journey through multiple dimensions becomes a source of restoration and empowerment rather than depletion and fragmentation. The Kabbalistic tradition also reveals that certain souls are naturally called to serve as what they called tikkun workers, consciousness that volunteered before incarnation to take on extra spiritual responsibilities during sleep, helping to repair and heal what they called the shattered worlds, the broken aspects of cosmic consciousness that resulted from humanity's fall from divine grace. But this type of soul service requires exceptional spiritual preparation and ongoing energetic support because it involves direct contact with the most challenging and dark aspects of collective human consciousness. Ancient Chinese Taoist masters, those alchemists of immortality who understood the flow of life force energy through natural and cosmic cycles, possessed incredibly sophisticated knowledge about what they called Shin travel, the movement of spiritual consciousness during sleep, and they recognized that the exhaustion most people experience upon waking is actually a sign that their spiritual energy has become scattered across multiple dimensions and timelines, unable to return completely to the physical body because of energetic blockages, emotional attachments, and karmic entanglements that create resistance to the natural flow of consciousness. The Taoist teachings describe sleep as a time when what they called Han and Pa, the ethereal soul and the corporeal soul, separate from the physical body and travel through what they called the 10,000 worlds, dimensions of existence that correspond to different frequencies of consciousness and spiritual development. But they understood that this separation and travel could become problematic if the individual's energy channels were blocked, their spiritual centers were unbalanced, or their emotional nature was disturbed by unresolved conflicts and desires that created energetic drag during soul travel. The Taoist masters developed elaborate practices including Qigong movements, internal alchemy meditations, and energy circulation techniques that were specifically designed to prepare the energy body for sleep consciousness travel, ensuring that when the Han and Pa left the physical form during sleep, they would move efficiently through the spiritual dimensions, complete their necessary work and learning, and return smoothly to the body upon waking with enhanced vitality rather than depletion and confusion. But they warn that attempting to force or control these natural processes through artificial techniques or ego-driven desires could actually make the problem worse by creating additional energetic friction and resistance. The Taoist tradition also understood that people going through spiritual awakening or major life transitions often experience what they called Shin disturbance, a condition where the spiritual consciousness becomes overactive during sleep, trying to process and integrate massive amounts of karmic information and cosmic energy that can overwhelm the nervous system and energy channels if proper cultivation practices aren't maintained to strengthen and balance the individual's capacity to handle these expanded states of awareness. The secret teachings of the Knights Templar, those mysterious warrior monks who were systematically destroyed by the Catholic Church after they gained access to hidden knowledge during the Crusades, contained profound understanding of what they called the sacred sleep, techniques for maintaining conscious awareness during the transition between waking and sleeping states that allowed them to access divine guidance, healing abilities, and prophetic visions that made them incredibly powerful, and ultimately threatening to established religious and political authorities. The Templar initiates understood that sleep consciousness could be trained to access what they called the Akashic Records, a cosmic library of all human experience and knowledge that exists in what modern physics would call quantum field dimensions. But they also recognized that unprepared contact with these vast repositories of information could completely overwhelm individual consciousness, leading to what they called sacred madness, a condition where the soul becomes lost in cosmic awareness and unable to return fully to ordinary reality, which explains why so many spiritually sensitive people report feeling like they're living in multiple dimensions simultaneously and never feeling completely present or grounded in their physical lives. The Templar masters developed specific ritual practices, energy protection techniques, and consciousness training methods that allowed initiates to venture into these expanded states of awareness during sleep while maintaining a strong anchor to their individual identity and physical body. But these practices required years of preparation, including purification of diet and lifestyle, mastery of emotional reactivity, and development of unwavering faith and spiritual courage, because they understood that the realm's access during sacred sleep contained not only divine wisdom and healing energies but also powerful testing experiences and encounters with what they called the guardians of the threshold, spiritual forces that challenge anyone seeking to access cosmic knowledge to ensure they have the integrity and strength to handle such profound responsibilities. The Catholic Church destroyed the Templars and banned their teachings because these practices revealed that individual human beings could access divine knowledge and healing abilities directly, without need for religious intermediaries, and because the cosmic perspective gained through sacred sleep made it impossible for practitioners to accept the limited, fear-based narratives that religious and political institutions use to maintain control over human consciousness and behavior. What makes this information even more explosive is the realization that modern society has been deliberately structured to prevent people from accessing these natural abilities, using artificial lighting, electromagnetic pollution, chemical additives in food and water, and constant mental stimulation to disrupt the natural rhythms and energy patterns that allow consciousness to move smoothly between waking and sleeping states, ensuring that most people remain trapped in what mystery schools called the prison of waking sleep, a condition where individuals are unconscious during both their sleeping and waking hours, unable to access their full spiritual potential or contribute to the evolution of human consciousness in meaningful ways. The exhaustion you feel upon waking isn't just a personal problem. It's actually a symptom of living in a civilization that has systematically suppressed human spiritual development and disconnected people from their natural cosmic awareness, creating a population that's spiritually malnourished and energetically depleted, unable to access the divine guidance, healing abilities, and creative inspiration that would naturally flow through properly developed consciousness. The ruling elites throughout history have understood that spiritually awakened populations are impossible to control through fear, manipulation, and artificial scarcity, so they've worked tirelessly to suppress the knowledge and practices that would allow ordinary people to develop their full consciousness potential, using religious dogma, materialistic scientism, and cultural conditioning to convince people that they're powerless, limited beings dependent on external authorities rather than divine souls with unlimited access to cosmic wisdom and creative power. The chronic exhaustion epidemic that affects millions of people isn't caused by overwork, stress, or lifestyle factors. It's caused by souls that are starving for genuine spiritual nourishment and connection to their cosmic purpose, forced to live in artificial environments that block natural energy flows and prevent access to the restorative and empowering experiences that should naturally occur during sleep consciousness travel. The solution to this epidemic of spiritual exhaustion requires understanding that you are not a physical body that occasionally has spiritual experiences. You are an eternal consciousness that temporarily inhabits a physical form, and your nightly journey through non-physical dimensions isn't something that happens to you. It's something that IS you at the deepest level of your being, which means that learning to work consciously with your sleep consciousness isn't just a nice spiritual practice. It's literally a matter of reclaiming your true identity and stepping into your full power as a multidimensional being with unlimited access to cosmic wisdom, healing energy, and creative potential. The ancient masters understood that the key to transforming exhaustion into empowerment lies in developing what they called conscious sleep, the ability to maintain awareness during the transition between waking and sleeping states and to participate actively in the spiritual work that your soul naturally engages in during these expanded states of consciousness. But this development requires systematic training of attention, purification of emotional and mental patterns, and cultivation of the energetic strength and stability needed to handle direct contact with cosmic forces without becoming overwhelmed or depleted. The first step in this transformation involves recognizing that your sleep experience is directly connected to your waking consciousness. The thoughts you think, the emotions you feel, the energy you carry, and the intentions you hold during your waking hours create the foundation for what happens when your consciousness expands beyond physical limitations during sleep, which means that developing conscious sleep begins with taking full responsibility for your mental, emotional, and energetic state throughout your entire day, treating every moment as preparation for the sacred journey that awaits you when you close your eyes at night. The practical application of this ancient wisdom begins with understanding that your bedroom isn't just a place where you rest your physical body. It's actually a sacred temple where your consciousness prepares for interdimensional travel, which means that the energy, intentions, and spiritual preparation you bring to your sleep environment directly affect the quality and outcomes of your nightly consciousness journey. And most people's bedrooms are energetically polluted with electromagnetic radiation, emotional residue from daily stress, and unconscious programming from entertainment media that creates interference patterns that disrupt the natural flow of consciousness during sleep transitions. Creating a proper sacred sleep environment requires treating your bedroom like the mystery school initiates treated their temple spaces, as a clean, protected, energetically clear space dedicated exclusively to spiritual practice and consciousness development, which means removing all electronic devices that emit electromagnetic frequencies, clearing the space regularly with sage, incense, or other purification methods, and establishing clear energetic boundaries that prevent external influences from disturbing your consciousness during its most vulnerable and expansive states. The ancient masters also understood that the transition into sleep consciousness requires specific preparation of the mental and emotional bodies. You cannot carry the day's stress, worry, anger, or mental chatter into sleep states and expect to have restorative experiences, because these lower vibrational energies create resistance and turbulence that prevent consciousness from moving smoothly into expanded awareness and force your soul to work much harder to process and clear these blockages before it can engage in the higher-level spiritual activities that should naturally occur during sleep. Developing a pre-sleep purification practice that includes meditation, prayer, energy-clearing techniques, and conscious release of the day's accumulated mental and emotional patterns is absolutely essential for anyone who wants to transform their sleep from a draining experience into the most powerful spiritual practice available to human beings, because it creates the internal conditions that allow consciousness to expand and travel efficiently through non-physical dimensions without carrying unnecessary energetic baggage that creates drag and depletion. The breathing techniques taught in mystery schools provide the most direct and powerful method for maintaining conscious awareness during the sleep transition and ensuring that your consciousness travels efficiently through expanded states without losing energy or becoming fragmented across multiple dimensions, because breath is the bridge between physical and non-physical reality, the vehicle that consciousness uses to move between different levels of existence, and by learning to control and direct your breathing during the transition into sleep, you can literally guide your consciousness through the doorway between worlds while maintaining awareness and intention. The Tibetan masters taught specific breathing patterns that they called wind horse breathing, techniques that use the rhythm and depth of breath to create energetic currents that carry consciousness smoothly into expanded states while maintaining a strong connection to individual identity and physical anchoring, preventing the soul from becoming lost or scattered in cosmic awareness and ensuring that the journey through non-physical dimensions becomes empowering rather than depleting. These advanced breathing practices require understanding of subtle energy anatomy, the chakra systems, energy channels, and spiritual centers that govern the flow of life force through both physical and non-physical bodies, because proper breath control during sleep transitions involves directing life force energy through specific pathways that prepare consciousness for interdimensional travel while maintaining the energetic integrity needed to return smoothly to ordinary awareness upon waking. The Egyptian mystery schools taught that breath during sleep preparation should follow what they called the rhythm of Ra, specific patterns that align individual consciousness with cosmic cycles and solar energies, ensuring that soul travel during sleep moves in harmony with universal forces rather than against them, which eliminates the energetic friction and resistance that causes exhaustion and creates instead a natural flow of empowerment and restoration that leaves practitioners feeling more energized and spiritually nourished after sleep than they felt before entering these expanded states. Understanding the role of diet and lifestyle in consciousness preparation reveals why so many people struggle with sleep exhaustion. The standard American diet filled with processed foods, artificial chemicals, and energetically dead substances creates dense, heavy energy in the physical body that prevents consciousness from moving freely into expanded states, forcing the soul to work much harder to separate from physical matter and creating energetic drag that depletes spiritual energy rather than enhancing it through contact with cosmic forces. The mystery schools understood that consciousness preparation required what they called the pure diet, foods that enhance rather than diminish spiritual sensitivity and energetic clarity, including fresh organic vegetables, pure spring water, and avoiding substances that create energetic density or alter consciousness in artificial ways, because they recognize that the physical body serves as the launching pad for consciousness travel and must be maintained in optimal energetic condition to support smooth transitions between physical and non-physical states of awareness. The ancient masters also understood that electromagnetic pollution from modern technology creates interference patterns in the subtle energy fields that surround and interpenetrate the physical body, disrupting the natural frequencies and rhythms that allow consciousness to expand and travel efficiently during sleep, which explains why people who live in heavily technological environments often report feeling drained and spiritually disconnected even when they get adequate amounts of physical sleep. Creating an electromagnetically clean sleep environment by removing Wi-Fi routers, cell phones, digital clocks, and other electronic devices from the bedroom isn't just about avoiding blue light exposure. It's about preserving the natural energy field conditions that allow consciousness to access its full multidimensional potential during the most sacred and transformative hours of the daily cycle, when the veils between worlds are naturally thinnest and spiritual development can occur at accelerated rates for those who know how to work consciously with these expanded states of awareness. The role of intention and spiritual purpose in sleep consciousness reveals why some people naturally wake up feeling energized while others feel depleted. Those who approach sleep with clear spiritual intentions, specific purposes for their consciousness journey, and conscious dedication to serving the highest good during their expanded awareness states find that their soul work becomes aligned with cosmic will, creating a flow of divine support and empowerment that enhances rather than drains their energy systems, while those who enter sleep unconsciously, without spiritual preparation or higher purpose, often find their consciousness scattered across multiple dimensions, processing random karmic patterns and collective emotional debris that leaves them feeling confused, exhausted, and spiritually empty upon waking. Setting conscious intentions for sleep consciousness travel requires understanding that you are not a passive victim of whatever happens to occur during your expanded awareness states. You are an active participant with the ability to direct your soul's activities, choose your spiritual destinations, and determine how your consciousness energy will be used during these precious hours when you have access to unlimited cosmic potential and divine guidance. The ancient masters taught specific invocation practices, prayer techniques, and intention-setting rituals that could be used before sleep to ensure that consciousness travel would be directed toward the highest spiritual purposes, healing personal karma, receiving divine guidance for life challenges, developing spiritual abilities, contributing to collective human evolution, and connecting with enlightened teachers and guides who could accelerate spiritual development beyond what's possible through ordinary waking consciousness alone. These preparation practices require developing genuine devotion to spiritual growth and service rather than approaching sleep consciousness work as another ego enhancement or personal development technique, because the cosmic forces that govern expanded awareness states respond only to authentic spiritual motivation and will withdraw their support from anyone who tries to use these sacred abilities for selfish purposes or personal gain rather than for the genuine upliftment and healing of consciousness itself. The protection practices taught in mystery schools provide essential knowledge for anyone working consciously with sleep consciousness, because the non-physical dimensions accessed during expanded awareness states contain not only divine beings and healing energies but also lower vibrational entities, astral parasites, and consciousness fragments that can attach to unprepared souls and drain their energy or create ongoing spiritual interference that affects both sleeping and waking experience. Understanding astral protection isn't about becoming paranoid or fearful. It's about developing the spiritual maturity and energetic strength needed to navigate non-physical dimensions with the same intelligence and caution that you would use when traveling through unfamiliar physical territories, recognizing that consciousness expansion brings both tremendous opportunities for spiritual growth and specific responsibilities for maintaining energetic integrity and spiritual discernment. The time for spiritual mediocrity and unconscious living is over. Humanity is in the midst of the greatest spiritual awakening in recorded history, and your sleep consciousness experiences are calling you to step into your full power as a cosmic being with unlimited access to divine wisdom, healing energy, and creative potential that can literally transform reality itself when properly understood and consciously applied. So stop settling for exhaustion and confusion when you could be experiencing the most profound spiritual adventures and transformative healing work available to any consciousness anywhere in the universe, because you are far more powerful, far more spiritually sophisticated, and far more cosmically important than you've ever been allowed to believe. And your nightly journey through expanded awareness states is the key to reclaiming your true identity and stepping into the extraordinary spiritual destiny that awaits every soul brave enough to embrace their multidimensional nature and dedicate their consciousness abilities to serving the divine plan for human spiritual evolution and planetary transformation that is unfolding right now through awakening souls just like you.